In my prison cell I sit, thinking, Mother dear, of you and our bright and happy home so far away. And the tears, they fill my eyes in spite of all that I can do, though I try to cheer my comrades and be gay. Oh, tramp, 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 the boys are marching. Cheer up, comrades, they will come. And beneath the starry flag we shall breathe the air again of the free land in our own beloved home.
In the battlefront we stood, where their fiercest charge they made, and they swept us off 100 men or more. But before they reached our lines, they were beaten back dismayed, and we heard the cry of victory o'er and o'er. Oh, tramp, 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 the boys are marching. Cheer up, comrades, they will come. And beneath the starry flag we shall breathe the air again of the free land in our own beloved home. So within the prison cell we are waiting for the day that shall come to open wide the iron door. Iron door!
And the hollow eye grows bright and the poor heart almost gay, and we think of seeing home and friends once more. Are marching. Cheer up, comrades, they will come. And beneath the starry flag we shall breathe the air again of the free land in our own beloved home. Oh, tramp, 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 the boys are marching. Cheer up, comrades, they will come. And beneath the starry flag we shall breathe the air again of the free land in our own beloved home.
Nation under God,
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
said, "Mr. President, when I die and go to heaven, you're the first person I want to meet." Well, I took her by the hand and I leaned down to her and I said, "Well, ma'am, I guess I saved you the trip." Fellow citizens, we cannot escape history. That is what I told Congress on December 1st, 1862. Fellow citizens, we cannot escape history. We of this Congress and this administration will be remembered in spite of ourselves. No personal significance or insignificance can spare one or another of us. The fiery trial through which we pass will light us down in honor or dishonor to the latest generation. We, even we here, hold the power and bear the responsibility. On January 1st, 1863, I issued the Emancipation Proclamation. As I prepared to sign it, I dipped my pen in the inkwell, and then, to the surprise of everyone in the room, myself included, I dropped the pen. My hand was trembling. It was not because of any doubt or uncertainty on my part. I'd never been more certain of anything in my life. I had been greeting New Year's guests since 9 o'clock that morning, and I had shaken so many hands that my own was nearly paralyzed. If my name ever goes into history, I told the people in that room, it shall be for this act, and my whole soul is in it. If I sign the proclamation with a trembling hand, all who examine it hereafter will say he hesitated. So I waited until my strength had returned. Then with a firm hand I signed Abraham Lincoln at the bottom of the document, which proclaimed that all persons held as slaves in any state or designated part of a state, the people whereof shall then be in rebellion against the United States, shall be then, thenceforward, and forever free. Exactly 6 months later, the bloodiest battle of the war began in Gettysburgh, Pennsylvania. So many men died there that it was necessary to establish a national cemetery right there on the spot. A committee was formed, and Governor Curtin named Mr. David Wills, a prominent local citizen, as the chairman. 1 month prior to the scheduled October 23rd dedication, Mr. Wills invited the Honorable Edward Everett of Massachusetts, the former U.S. Senator and President of Harvard, to deliver the keynote address. Mr. Everett responded that he would need more time to prepare and memorize his 2-hour speech. The earliest he could be ready would be November 19th, so that date was agreed upon. On November 2nd, I was invited as Chief Executive of the nation to formally set apart these grounds to their sacred use by a few appropriate remarks. The plan was that I was to go to Gettysburg the day of the ceremony, leaving Washington at 6 a.m., changing trains in Baltimore, and arriving at noontime for the 2 o'clock ceremony. But knowing the problems with travel during wartime, I said to my secretaries, "I do not like this arrangement. By the slightest accident, we shall fail entirely." Now, my invitation from Mr. Wills had included a handwritten note which said, "As the hotels in our town will be crowded and in confusion, I write to invite you to stop with me." So it was decided I would go the day before and I would stop with Mr. Wills. I almost did not make the trip to Gettysburg at all. As you may know, my wife and I had 4 sons. Robert was born in 1843, Edward in 46, but he died when he was not quite 4 years old. He had consumption, which you would now call tuberculosis. He's buried in Springfield. The year he died, Willie was born. Then finally in 53 we had Thomas, who we call Tad, because when he was born he resembled a tadpole. Well, in 1862, Willie contracted typhoid fever and died. The following year, as I prepared to go to Gettysburg, Tad, our youngest, came down with what turned out to be a mild case of smallpox. As you can imagine, Mrs. Lincoln was beside herself, sure that if I left the White House, we would lose yet another son. She demanded that I stay in Washington. I insisted that I must go up to Gettysburg. As it turned out, I too had contracted a slight case of smallpox. On the return trip to Washington, I slept the entire time in the train car. Arriving back at the White House, I was forced to take my only vacation, 2 weeks in the sickbed. Even though I was yet contagious, I still admitted office seekers, reasoning that at least now I had something that I could offer to everyone. I arrived in Gettysburg on November 18th at dusk and was met at the station by Mr. Wills and Mr. Everett. As we walked through the station, I detected the scent of pine and noticed the stacks of fresh coffins for reburial of the dead. We walked the two blocks to the home of Mr. Wills, where a banquet and several dozen guests were awaiting us. The word spread during dinner throughout town that the president was at the home of Mr. Wills, and soon a large crowd gathered. The band from the 5th New York Artillery joined in and drew even more people, and they clamored for me to make an appearance, so I came to the window and offered the following brief remark. I appear before you, ladies and gentlemen, merely to thank you for this compliment. The inference would be a very fair one that you would hear me for a little while at least were I to commence to make a speech. I do not appear before you for the purpose of doing so and for several substantial reasons. The most substantial of these that I have no speech to make. In my position, it is somewhat important that I should not say any foolish things. It very often happens that the only way to help it is to say nothing at all. Believing that is my present condition this evening, I must beg of you to excuse me from addressing you further. That evening, as we prepared to retire, we learned that Governor Curtin had not yet arrived in Gettysburg. Mr. Wills wanted to make sure he had a place to stay, so he asked Mr. Everett if he wouldn't mind sharing his bed with the governor should he arrive later. In consequence, Mr. Everett lay awake until 1 o'clock in the morning, fearful that any moment the chief executive of the state would come tumbling in upon him. Mr. Everett's daughter was forced to share with 2 other ladies a bed which, in the middle of the night, under their weight, collapsed. Mr. David Saunders, the rural architect who had designed the cemetery and who would have a prominent place on the dais the next day, was forced to sleep sitting up in a crowded parlor. The next morning, we gathered in the town square for the procession up to the cemetery. All the dignitaries were assigned mounts, and mine was a small bay horse, which, not accounting for my stature, left me with my boots almost touching the ground. On my hands I wore white gauntlets, on my hat a mourning band for the fallen soldiers, and also for my son Willie. As we started to proceed up to the cemetery, I thought about the speech I was to give. Even though I'd only had 17 days' notice, the ideas for such a speech had been gathering by bits and pieces up here for years in my filing cabinet. I was particularly mindful of 3 things. First, that it was our fathers and our grandfathers who had created this great republic, and now we must preserve it. As I later told the 166th Ohio Regiment, it is not merely for today, but for all time yet to come that we should perpetuate for our children's children this great and free government which we have enjoyed all our lives. Secondly, I was asked, according to the program, to make a few dedicatory remarks. What, or rather whom, was being dedicated. And finally, at the conclusion of my speech, I meant to defy those who, in the darkest days of the war, had declared dead this great republic, the last best hope of earth. Edward Everett spoke for 2 hours. If you want to know what he said, you can look it up. It's in the books. I spoke for 2 minutes. If you want to know what I said, you can ask any school child. 77 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Now we are engaged in a great civil war, testing whether that nation or any other nation so conceived and so dedicated can long endure. We are met on the great battlefield of that war. We have come to dedicate a portion of that field as a final resting place for those who here gave their lives that that nation might live. It is altogether fitting and proper that we should do this. But in a larger sense, we cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate, we cannot hallow this ground. The brave men, living and dead, who struggled here, have consecrated it far above our poor power to add or detract. The world will little note nor long remember what we say here, but it can never forget what they did here. It is for us, the living, rather, to be dedicated here to the unfinished work which they who fought here have thus so far nobly advanced. It is rather for us to be here dedicated to the great task remaining before us, that from these honored dead we take increased devotion to that cause for which they gave the last full measure of devotion. That we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation, under God, shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth.
3 cheers for the President. Hurrah! 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 Hurrah!
Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. He is trampling out the mountains where the grapes of wrath are stored. He hath loosed the faithful lightning of his terrible swift sword. His true day is marching on. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, that you'll never call retreat. He is sifting out the hearts of men before his judgment seat. Oh, be swift, my soul, to answer him. Be jubilant, my feet. Our God is marching on. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Our God is marching on. In the beauty of the lilies, Christ was born across the sea. In the glory in his bosom, God transfigures you and me. As he died to make men holy, let us die to make men free. While God is marching on. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. While God is marching on. He is coming with the glory of the morning on the wave. He is wisdom to the mighty. He is succor to the brave. So the world should be his footstool, and the soul of time his slave. Our God is marching on. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Our God is marching on. Amen.
Talked about this. Me and Michael are huge into history. We do French and Indian War, Revolutionary War reenacting, and this Saugerties has a long history of sacrifice and service, and you know, us as Scouts, the same, and Saugerties has a real big history in, you know, the service in the Civil War. My cemetery that I cleaned up when I was a wee lad to get my Eagle Scout had Civil War veterans in it, and it was a great honor for me because some of them they did not know about at the time, so it was a great honor to have them dedicated and found. On this 150th anniversary in the Gettysburgh Address, I'd actually like to present to Bill Payne and veterans in the Newfield for keeping that heritage alive. In Gettysburg, the National Park Service and Boy Scouts of America have a heritage trail, and when you walk the trail, you can earn a historic patch and medal. So we'd like to present them with the Heritage Guide Trail Book as well as the patch and the medal.
It's really unexpected and really appreciate it. Thank you very, very much. The Legion and we here in Betson Newfield have worked closely with Mike and with the Scouts and Historic Preservation. So we're honored and humbled. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
To his posterity, swear by the blood of the Revolution never to violate in the least particular the laws of the country, and never to tolerate their violation by others.
Thank you, Mr.
For the choice of the nation, our chieftains so brave and so true, we'll go for the great Reformation, for Lincoln and liberty too. For Lincoln and liberty too. For Lincoln and liberty too. We'll go for the great Reformation, for Lincoln and liberty too.
They'll find what by felling and mauling our rail makers, statesmen can do. For the people are everywhere calling our Lincoln and liberty too. For Lincoln and liberty too. For Lincoln and liberty too. For the people are everywhere calling for Lincoln and liberty too.
Then up with the banners from Troy, the star-spangled red, white, and blue. We'll fight till our banners victorious, for Lincoln and liberty too.
For Lincoln and liberty too. For Lincoln and liberty too. We'll fight till our banner's victorious. For Lincoln and liberty too. Come all you true friends of the nation, attend to humanity's call. Come aid in the slaves' liberation and roll on the Liberty Ball. And roll on the Liberty Ball. And roll on the Liberty Ball. Come aid in the slaves' liberation and roll on the Liberty Ball.
We'll finish the temple of freedom
And make it capacious within,
that all who seek shelter may find it,
whatever the hue of their skin. Whatever the hue of their skin. Whatever the hue of their skin. That all who seek shelter may find it, whatever the hue of their skin. Success to the old-fashioned doctrine that men are created all free, and down with the power of the despot wherever his stronghold may be. Wherever his stronghold may be. Wherever his stronghold may be. And down with the power of the despot wherever his stronghold may be. Hurrah for the choice of the nation, our chieftains so brave and so true. We'll go for the great Reformation, for Lincoln and liberty too. For Lincoln and liberty too. For Lincoln and liberty too. We'll go for the great Reformation, for Lincoln and liberty too.
The probable termination of the war, and the one said she thought the South would prevail. And he said, why does he think so? The first one said, well, because Jeff Davis is a praying man. But yes, the other said, but so is Abraham Lincoln a praying man. Yes, said the first, but when old Abe prays, the Lord would just think he's joking.
Old Abe Lincoln went down to Washington, went down to Washington, went down to Washington. Old Abe Lincoln went down to Washington many long years ago. Many long years ago. Many long years ago. Old Abe Lincoln went down to Washington many long years ago. Then old Jeff Davis tore down the government, tore down the government, tore down the government. Old Jeff Davis tore down the government many long years ago. Many long years ago. Many long years ago. Old Jeff Davis tore down the government many long years ago. Old Abe Lincoln built up a better one, built up a better one, built up a better one. Old Abe Lincoln built up a better one many long years ago. Many long years ago. Many long years ago. Old Abe Lincoln built up a better one many long years ago.
Sung by her in Detroit, Washington, and was written particularly for the 1st Michigan Regiment of Colored Soldiers. And so we're going to do that one for you now. The President has consented to say a few words of wisdom concerning that.
By all means, don't say, if I can, say, I will. Determine that the thing can and shall be done, and then we shall find the way.
We are the valiant soldiers who enlisted for the war. We are fighting for the Union. We are fighting for the law. We can shoot a rebel father that a white man ever saw as we go marching on. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. As we go marching on.
Look there above the center where the flag is waving bright. We are going out of slavery. We are bound for freedom's fight. We need to show Jeff Davis how the Africans can fight. As we go marching on.
Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. As we go marching on. We are done with hoeing cotton. We are done with hoeing corn. We are colored Yankee soldiers.
Civil Rights Act of the 1960s.
To the window. Hey Nellie, Nellie, come looky what I see. He's riding into town on a swayback mule. Got a tall black hat and he looks like a fool, but he sure has been a-talking like he's been to school. And it's 1853. Listen to what he's saying. Hey Nellie, Nellie, he says it's getting late. He's saying all them colored folk should all be free to walk around the same as you and me. He's talking about something he calls equality, and it's 1858. Hear the band a-playing. Hey Nellie, Nellie, come hand me down my gun. 'Cause the men are a-cheering and the boys are too. They're all putting on their coats of blue, and I can't sit around here and talk with you. And it's 1861. Hey Nellie, Nellie, I've come home alive. Oh, my coat of blue is stained with red. The man in the tall black hat is dead, but we sure will remember all the things he said. And it's 1860. Oh, hey, Nellie, Nellie, come to the window. Hey, Nellie, Nellie, come looky what I see. I see white folk and black folk walking side by side. They're marching in a column or a century wide. But it's a long, hard, and bloody road to ride to get equality.
He made a charge of bayonets. The rebel laggards soon gave way. They fell as thick as pavements. After slaughtered that we named me, and it was elating. For the Irish lads in action north and those boys were fighting. From Remembrance and we'll lead us all to glory, oh, we'll lead us all to glory, oh, to save the Spencer's son. I'm sure we never will give in any sort of manner until the South comes back again beneath the starry banner. And if John Bolton didn't fear, he'd suffer for his Rooney, for soon the Irish volunteers would give him Matty Hooney. And we'll fight for Remembrance and we'll lead us all to glory, oh, we'll lead us all to glory, oh, we'll save the Spencer's son. And before I end my song, Is done from the sun, from the hills, from the lake, from the sky. All is well, safely rest. God is nigh. Go to sleep. Sleep. May the soldier or sailor God keep on the land or the deep, safe and sleep. Thanks and praise for our day. The sun, neath the stars, neath the sky, as we go, this we know, God is nigh.
Thank you, everybody.
By the bivouac's fitful flame, a procession winding around me, solemn and sweet and slow. But first I note the tents of the sleeping army, the fields and woods' dim outline, the darkness lit by spots of kindled fire, the silence like a phantom far or near, an occasional figure moving, the shrubs and trees. As I lift my eyes, they seem to be stealthily watching me. While wind in procession thoughts, oh tender and wondrous thoughts, of life and death, of home and the past and loved, and of those that are far away. A solemn and slow procession there as I sit on the ground by the bivouac's fitful flame.
We're tenting tonight on the old campground. Give us a song to cheer our weary hearts, a song of home and friends we love so dear. Many are the hearts that are weary tonight, wishing for the war to cease. Many are the hearts that are looking for the right to see the dawn of peace. Tenting tonight, tenting tonight, tenting on the old campground. We've been tenting tonight on the old campground, thinking of days gone by, of the loved ones at home that gave us the hand and the tear that said goodbye. Many are the hearts that are weary tonight, wishing for the war to cease. Many are the
hearts that are looking for the right to see the dawn of peace. Tenting tonight, tenting tonight, tenting on the old campground.
We're tired of war on the old campground. Many are the dead and gone. Of the brave and true who've left their homes, others been wounded long. Many are the hearts that are weary tonight, wishing for the war to cease. Many are the hearts that are looking for the right to see the dawn of peace. Tenting tonight, tenting tonight, tenting on the old campground. We've been fighting today on the old campground. Many are lying near. Some are dead and some are dying. Many are in tears. Many are the hearts that are weary tonight, wishing for the war to cease. Many are the hearts that are looking for the right to see the dawn of peace. Dying tonight, dying tonight, dying on the old camp.